And now, for a keynote address, the Assistant Secretary General of Emerging Security Challenges at NATO, the Honorable David van Weel, please.
Thank you, and I think you're one of the first at a conference that actually pronounced my name exactly right. So, thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be with you here today. The Herzliya conference has become something of a golden standard of international security conference, both because of the high level attendance you have, but also the pertinent discussions, and I think I was just witness to one of them. Today's event is no different. The theme of the gathering, vision and strategy in an era of uncertainty, could hardly be timelier. Indeed, when you look at today's security environment, the term uncertainty almost appears like an understatement. But I didn't come here to lament. After all, I represent an organization here that has now been in business for almost 75 years. And during these many years, we faced many challenges, and pundits repeatedly claimed that NATO was in a terminal crisis. NATO always proved them wrong, because we're able to adapt to the changing security environment. And although I believe that today's challenges are more challenging and daunting than ever, they're not insurmountable. What we need to do is to understand this environment and then come up with the right answers. So, what are the major characteristics of our security environment? And how must NATO respond if it wants to remain the security umbrella for almost 1 billion people? First, it's an environment in which great power rivalries are coming to the fore again. The era that we conveniently called the post-Cold War is definitely over. Competition is the name of the game, and in some cases, this competition is played out with non-military means. However, Russia's attack on Ukraine was a true game changer. A major power started an unprovoked war against a neighboring country. And this attack took place with the clearly stated intention to eradicate not only that country's political leadership, but also its national and cultural identity. Few of us, also at NATO, believed that such a conflict would still be possible in Europe. And the fact that it happened after all should serve as a reminder that we must never be complacent. Even if the security order on the European continent is of half as stable as we thought it was, then what are we to expect from other parts of the world, such as the Taiwan Straits? Secondly, it is an environment that is characterized by a host of regional crises and conflicts, ranging from fighting from continuing chaos in Libya to proxy wars in Yemen. And these regional crises leave us with a cruel choice: engagement, which may be costly and long-term without any guarantee of success, or indifference. Indifference may be less costly in the short run, but could cost us more once the great powers fill the vacuum that is left by the West, and once terrorist attacks or refugee flows challenge our political stability at home. Third, it is an environment that is characterized by increasing nuclear rivalries, particularly in Asia and here in the Middle East, which threaten to turn every regional conflict into a global conflagration. North Korea's missiles can now reach the continental United States, and soon it will have warheads small enough to fit on these missiles. And looking at the recent reports of the International Atomic Energy Agency about Iran's behavior, one cannot but conclude that Tehran, with or without any agreement, remains determined to acquire a nuclear option. Fourth, it is an environment we live in that is increasingly dominated by ever more frequent and ever more destructive cyber attacks. Attacks that can hardly be deterred by kinetic means. And it's characterized by hybrid forms of warfare that are designated to create ambiguity and thus make any collective response very, very difficult. Fifthly, it's an environment that's increasingly shaped by climate change. It is both a threat multiplier and a factor that transforms the very environment in which our own forces have to operate. Once the temperatures climb above 50 degrees, like in Iraq at the moment, military operations become next to impossible. And once the waterways in the high north have become ice-free, we will have new economically beneficial trade routes, but we could also see a new era of military competition. And almost last, it is an environment where new technologies, such as artificial intelligence, big data, or autonomy, create new military opportunities, but unfortunately, they don't only create opportunities for us, but also for our adversaries. And this will make future conflicts even less predictable. Seventh, it is an environment where new types of media create alternative realities that could undermine the unity and resolve of democratic societies. Indeed, fake news on social media, reinforced with deep fakes and other means of deception, may well be among the biggest challenges facing our democratic societies. And that leads to my final and probably most worrisome trend, the rise of illiberalism, including in Western societies. It downplays or even ridicules all the historic achievements of open societies, and it allows Russia or China to advertise their authoritarian models as viable alternatives to the Western model of democracy, tolerance, human rights, and the rule of law. If this trend continues unabated, the power of the West to shape the global agenda will be diminishing, and at the worst possible of times. I could go on listing even more challenges, and we heard about energy challenges before, but let's go to the solutions, which are much more interesting. So what must NATO do to confront this new, more competitive environment? How can NATO remain a viable instrument of the transatlantic democracies to safeguard their security, but also to shape the security environment in line with our values and interests? I won't go into a long shopping list here, but I will focus on 3 key areas that I believe will be crucial for NATO's future as a security provider. A security provider for its member states, but also for its partner countries like Israel. And the first area is military capabilities. Ronald Reagan put it best. He said, "I once played a sheriff who thought he could do the job without a gun, and I was dead 27 minutes into the show." As much as we may talk about soft power and the need for it, it will amount to little if we can't back it up with credible hard power. Russia's assault on Ukraine has been another reminder that only a capable military can assure one's survival. And I'm afraid that Russia is not the only country with revisionist temptations. Military competence remains key to our security. And here in Israel, that's of course hardly breaking news. However, our understanding of what capabilities are must change. We need to be aware that in today's threat environment, traditional military capabilities increasingly interact with non-kinetic means. Cyber attacks, for example, have long been a tool for industrial espionage, but they've also become an integral part of any military campaign, and we've seen that in Ukraine. Similarly, a well-demonstrated and orchestrated act of sabotage against critical infrastructure can undermine a country's ability to build a coherent military defense. Disinformation can be used as a tool to destabilize a state, but it can also be part of a hybrid campaign intended to prepare for and then mask a direct military aggression against a neighboring state. To put it bluntly, visible armed forces doing visible things is only one piece of the puzzle. More and more, it will be the invisible stuff that really matters. And in such an environment, the resilience of our societies, of our energy and our communications networks becomes as important as deterrence and defense by military means. By the same token, in an area of hybrid conflict, intelligence and the sharing of intelligence among allies becomes a true capability, and one that we must constantly seek to improve. In short, we need strong military capabilities, but we also need to ensure that these capabilities perform as they were intended. And that brings me to the second of my 3 issues, which is innovation. Once upon a time, innovation would take place in the military, and later would be making its way into the civilian sector. We can all think of GPS, Velcro, and the internet as some small examples of that. But not anymore. Today, many new technologies are being developed by the private sector rather than the military, and many more actors are gaining access to them. Clearly, artificial intelligence, big data analysis, or quantum technology promise huge security benefits, but they can also empower adversaries, enabling them to orchestrate smarter and stealthier attacks. And one common example is the frequent use of armed drones in various contemporary conflicts. Hence, we can no longer take NATO's technological edge for granted. Maintaining it requires a dedicated effort, not only to get a firm grasp on new technologies, but also to actively foster innovation. Last year, NATO made a major leap forward in this regard by setting up the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, or in short, DIANA. Focusing on technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and biotechnology, DIANA will bring defense personnel together with selected startups, researchers, and technology companies to tackle specific security challenges that we face. Innovators that are participating in DIANA's programs will receive access to its network of dozens of accelerator sites and test centers across NATO. We've also set up a multinational NATO Innovation Fund, which is the first ever multi-sovereign venture capital fund. And it will invest 1 billion euros in early stage startups and other deep tech funds aligned with its strategic objectives. And since emerging and disruptive technologies also raise legal and moral issues that require thorough examination, we have defined principles of responsible use for these technologies. Now, I don't want to create the impression that innovation is all about technology. As the management guru Peter Drucker said, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. And that's why innovation must also encompass the way that NATO operates. What does that mean? For example, it means injecting non-traditional threats in our exercises, inviting internal experts to brief us about unconventional challenges, and reaching out to the scientific community to better understand the implications of new technologies. Innovation also means building a more agile public diplomacy so that we can debunk fake news campaigns before they develop their intended effect. And innovation also means getting the North Atlantic Council at NATO to engage in tabletop exercises about hybrid threats or discussing the security implications of the transition to clean energy with high-level representatives from the European Union and the International Energy Agency. In short, innovation means staying ahead of the curve and connecting NATO to a much broader group of stakeholders than has been the case in the past. In today's complex world, no institution can claim a monopoly on wisdom. And this brings me to my third and my final point, which is new networks. We must learn how to become more holistic. As I already said, in today's security environment, security requires much more than just a strong military. Countering non-traditional security challenges requires a whole-of-government approach. Defense ministries, foreign ministries, and interior ministries must no longer see themselves as isolated silos that hardly talk to one another. And by the same token, we must also get the private sector on board, because it's a private sector that owns large parts of our cyber, energy, communication, and transport networks in most of our countries. Simply put, the owners and operators of the networks know about the vulnerabilities of their networks. NATO knows how to deter attacks against those networks. Hence, we need a trustful dialogue with these companies. And the days when talking with just the defense industry was sufficient are long gone. We also need to deepen our networks with our partner countries. The exchange of best practices with like-minded nations is among the most important elements in fostering a common approach to bolstering our collective resilience. Ukraine and Georgia, for example, can tell us a lot about their experience with Russian destabilization strategies. Australia can tell us a lot about its experience with Chinese influence campaigns. And of course, here in Israel, you know a lot about dealing with non-state actors, innovation, and other challenges. There is a wealth of information and experience out there that we need to tap into. We have to compare notes about entirely new means that help bolster our security. For example, national legislation that makes it more difficult for foreign countries to acquire critical infrastructure, or that makes it more difficult for certain foreign media outlets to spread false information in our open societies. And perhaps not every national solution may be applicable wholesale to all other countries. But I'm convinced that over time, a solid acquis will emerge on how to increase our national resilience. Our toolbox may be better than we think if we connect the dots. Ladies and gentlemen, you might know the American saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But I'm here representing a very old dog of 75 years of age, and that is in man years. This dog has little choice than to learn new tricks. And it can. After all, the transatlantic community has been labeled a learning community for a reason. It is a group of like-minded nations that has understood that change is inevitable and that we need to constantly adapt to it. And today, that group of like-minded nations extends well beyond the members of NATO. Indeed, many of our partner countries, including Israel, we view as part of this community. We're learning together. And this fills me with confidence that we will emerge from the current era of uncertainty both safer and stronger. Thank you.